Hi, this is Katie Weeks, your independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today, the Inspiration Collaboration Design Team will be featuring the online Christmas exclusives that are available through Stampin' Up! Merry Christmas in July. I just pulled out the season of gold and season of green and gold suite, and oh my goodness, it was like Christmas because I opened it up and I already had been oohing and ahhing over this vellum. There's 3 designs and 2 sheets of each 12 by 12 sheet of vellum that comes, and that's in the Graceful Greenery vellum, and it's gorgeous. And then you had 6 sheets, 2 of each, of the season of green and gold papers, and then each of those have a separate design on the back, so you end up with 12 designs of that. And I was really excited. Some of these are more on the back, it's just more of a versatile type of patterns, and the front is more Christmas holiday. You do have like some stars and some polka dots, I think, someplace, but they have gold foiling on them. Can you see that? It is absolutely gorgeous. And then I got out the golden greenery. Well, I got out all the stamps and dies that came with it. And inside this one, golden greenery dies, you have these 2 sets. It's 1 set actually of dies, and many of these dies line up perfectly with the patterns on some of the sheets of vellum and on a couple of the sheets. Let me see, I think it's this one and maybe one other one that they line up with the images on there. So you can stamp with the stamp set, or you can cut directly out of the paper. This is going to be fun. So what I'm working with today is on page 22 of the Stampin' Up! Catalog. I am doing sketch number, I think I'm up to 5, sketch number 5. So that's where I'm going to be making a card and a layout. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to get started with the card, and I'm going to cut the inside of the card first. And so I am cutting it to, let me see, 5 1/4 by 8 inches, I believe. Yes, and then I fold that in half. I score it at 4 inches, and I'm going to use this on the inside of my card. And then that was very vanilla, which makes a really great neutral. If you came over from close to my heart, you might remember this as our old colonial white. It's very similar, and I know some of you have desperately missed that color. So then I'm going to cut the outside of my card to 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and we will score that at 5 1/2 inches, and this will be the outside of my card. Next, I'm going to be cutting a layer. It's the one that has the 2 dovetails if you look at that page 22 sketch, and it's going to be cut around 3 1/4 by 3 3/4, I think. So I've been trying to go through this book and sketch out the cards and how big I want them. Actually, it's more like 3 1/4 by 4 1/2 inches. So there is no precise measurements that we've been given. Then the other piece from that Seasons of Green and Gold DSP, this one, I played with this one a couple of times, and this is the one that's 3 3/4 by about 3 1/4. So that goes across the front. And then what I did with the dovetail is I cut in the center, and I measured it on my cutter just because that was the easiest way to do it. And I cut down about 1/4 of an inch, and I cut up from the bottom about 1/4 of an inch, or 1/2 inch. It depends on how much you want yours to dip. I actually did it closer to 1/2 inch. And then I cut in from the corners. And so next I'm going to come in with another piece of that Very Vanilla, and I'm going to cut one of the tags from the Seasons, Greetings of the Seasons die set. And I cut a couple different ones just to make sure I had what I wanted. And then I'm going to cut some of this vellum. Oh, doesn't it like almost hurt your heart to cut into these beautiful sheets of vellum? But I know I want to come in with my dies and die cut some of these pieces out. So I try to match up my dies, figure out which ones I want to go after. And when I cut in, I try to cut a couple that I could possibly use when I'm cutting into it. And so then I find the matching dies, and I go in and I cut 2 of these little leaf branches. They cut real nicely on the mini die cutting machine. I cut them both through, and I'm going to use some different layers. I don't even know for sure which layers I'm putting on the front of the card, which ones I'm going to put on the inside of the card, but I just go through and cut several of them. And there were some little berry clusters as well, so I took that tiny little die to cut out that cluster of 3 berries. I cut a couple of those, and I'll use that on the inside of the card later on in this video. So then I have this other sheet of vellum, and it had the pine branches on it. Some with the white looks like it almost has snow on the branches, and I cut a bunch of these branches out. I will be using them both on the card and on the layout. So I cut them out and just cut them small enough to be able to put them on that die cutting plate, and then I used my die, and there are pieces from both this vellum and from the DSP that cut from this same die. So I had cut out a bunch of the vellum, and that's what I used the most on both the card and on the layout. So I just went to town cutting all sorts of pieces. Next, I bring in the Greetings of the Season, and I'm going to be stamping up that tag, and I'm just going to pull off the real beautiful scripty Merry Christmas. So these words are separate, so you have a lot of options as to how you want those greetings to be used on your card. I really wish I could have fit on there, wishing you a before my Merry Christmas. I just did not have enough room on that tiny little tag, but I think that would always be nice to put on there as well. And I really like a mixture of fonts, which I'm going to use later on anyways inside my card, some of the longer ones. So I'm going to ink this up, and I ended up pulling out Clover from my old Close to My Heart stash. I found later that I had shaded spruce that I could have used, and that would have probably matched and looked really nice. But I'm just not familiar with all of my Stampin' Up colors quite yet. And so if you have Stampin' Up colors, then you know the Garden Green would have probably have been my first choice of what I would have wanted to use. So I tried to pick something that was kind of comparable to that. So you see, I am still die cutting because I just can't get over that my dies match my papers and my vellum, and I just think that is so cool. So I really went to town just cutting things and having fun trying to match them up and find out how much I could cut out with it. I also came in with the gold and greenery dies and realized that I could cut out some of those gold bells. And I thought that would look adorable to help fill in that blank part of that tag and use as a decorative element on the front of my card. So then I came in with my mono multi-liquid glue and I started putting on my layers. And one of the reasons I used the multi-glue to put down a lot of things today was because, number one, it had a lot of that gold in it, and I didn't know if my regular adhesive would have trouble adhering to those glossy parts of the cardstock. And I found that it worked pretty nicely on the back of the vellum, which I was surprised. I'm always looking for a good adhesive for behind the vellum. And since this had printed vellum, I think that's why it worked so nicely, because those prints of those different pine branches and the twigs and leaves and things like that, that really hid what was going on with the adhesive. So I did that, and then I brought in my Natural Tones linen thread. I love this. It has a green in there that is just beautiful, and I worked it through my tag because, as Katie Taylor says, we can't have no naked tags. So I make sure that I put that through and tie off the tag on the front of my card. And then I'm also going to bring in the Cherry Cobbler and Pearl Adhesive-backed berries. And I'm just using the pearl ones, and I use that to also decorate on the front of my tag. I thought it gave it a little bit of dimension, another texture that I could bring in on the front of my card, and I thought that was absolutely perfect. And I'm wondering why the Amazon people are going past my house and not dropping off my packages. Anyways, back to my card. So I have the inside of my card that I wanted to do. And I did pop those bells up with dimensionals. So I think that looks really cute. And I tied them together with a little bit of that linen thread. So for the inside of the card, it opens an extra time. So the garden green cardstock opens to reveal the inside of the card, and then my very vanilla layer will also open for the inside of the card. I guess I should have tried to speed this up even more. Here we go. The outside is finished. That's pretty. So for the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp up on the front of the card, well, the front cover of the inside. Okay, so layer 2, and it's going to say, "It's the most wonderful time of the year," again from the Greetings of the Season stamp set. And then on the very inside, the third layer, I'm going to stamp, "May your holiday season be filled with warmth and cheerful celebration." So I loved both of these. So this card was one that I decided to add an extra fold to, because what better way when you can't pick a sentiment than to use both of them. And I love these because it has the mixture of that beautiful scripty font and then that very plain sans serif all cap font as well. So it just looks absolutely beautiful. So on this layer 2, I'm going to add one of my twigs with leaves, and it just is enough to decorate it without going crazy. I mean, it's not the front of a card, but I didn't want it too plain. And then on the inside of the card, I added like 2 or 3, I think it was 2 of my branches that I cut from my pine branches. So the one was the very end of a paper, so it was very straight. So the inside of the card, the crease of the card was the perfect place to put it. and it looked very natural that way, like it was peeking out within that layer. So the outside, layer 2, layer 3. Isn't that beautiful? I really like this card. So let's go now and use the same sketch from page 22, and let's do the layout. So this one, I'm going to cut the first piece of DSP to 10.5 by 6 3/4. And then I cut down quite a bit on this one. I cut down like 1.5 inches. And after I did it, I think I should have like done 1 inch and worked my way up. I think 1 inch or 1.25 inches I would have liked a little better, but I trimmed in from each corner and have my nice double dovetailed layer for the back of my cluster of layers here. So then I'm going to cut from my Very Vanilla the largest tag that is in that golden greenery set. And what I did was I cut it, but not all the way through, and then moved down my die and made it an extended tag. So it was just that same shorter die, and I extended it by how I layered the things on my die cutting machine, and I had part of it hanging off the end, and then I just made it a little bit longer. I thought that was fun to play with, and I'm going to be putting this on my garden green cardstock, and I'm going to put it on as a layer kind of like this, and then I'm coming in and using my plaid that's on the back of one of those beautiful layers. So I was having trouble trying to decide how big to make this because I really want that plaid to show up beneath these layers. So I cut it like 5 3/4 by 7 3/4, I believe. And that lets a lot of that plaid show around the outside, and I can still have my 5 by 7 layer on top of it, and it still shows like 3/8 of an inch all the way around. So that's great. So again, I'm using that multi-glue for this big piece, and I will use it on the next layer too to make sure it really sticks to those shiny dots that are all over those Swiss dots that show through. So I started to put down just a photo placeholder, and I decided, no, it needs to be Very Vanilla. So I went and cut a 5 by 7 Very Vanilla for a placeholder. And then the next thing I did was actually order a 5 by 7 picture and trimmed it down just about 1/4 inch on 2 sides so that it would fit. And it kind of breaks my heart to put this pretty gold bells upside down, but I absolutely love the plaid that's on the back as well. So I used the T-ruler just to line it up because that layer that goes diagonal really messes with my head, and I have trouble making things nice and straight. So I trimmed this down to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and it's a family Christmas picture from this past year. And then I'm going to do a fun little technique that 2 uplines up from me, Naomi Smith, showed us recently. And I've seen this before, and it's just one of those things I've never really played with. So what you do is take a piece of cardstock, and this one is cherry cobbler in case you're wondering, and put on a piece of packing tape. What I neglected to do, and she did teach us this, is put the adhesive, the sheet of adhesive on the back. It would have made it much easier when you want to put down the die cuts later. So I did the packing tape on both of these layers, and I put down some dies that I had in my stash that say Merry Christmas, and they are a big enough, scripty, pretty fonts, and I thought this would look adorable on that big tag. So now you know how I figured out how long to make my tag. I used the word Christmas to measure it out. So put the packing tape on the front, put an adhesive sheet on the back, do yourself a favor, and then run those through the die cutting machine. And when you pull it out, that will look like it's embossed with clear embossing powder. It's like the laziest, best way to do embossing. I love this. So I have those pretty words all cut out, and then I made sure I punched out all the tiny little inside pieces. And I'm also going to bring in my just the gold gel pen. I was just looking for something thin, and about a 1/4 inch from the outside all the way around my page, I'm going to draw a line. And I decided, like, I need to do this before I put on my tag. It'll just be easier to work all the way around. And I have always found that if you pull down, it's easier to stay straight. It's easier for me to keep my hand steady and to write smoothly when I'm doing lines. And then if you can use a T-ruler, it's even better. Sometimes I like it to be a little whimsical and wavy, and I just freehand those lines, but I still pull down toward myself. But when I want it nice and straight, like something like this layout, I wanted it to be a little bit nicer and straighter, not quite as whimsical. So, and I just keep turning my whole scrapbook layout and keep pulling down. And that's how I went around the outside, and it just gave it enough of a finishing touch because it did not look quite finished off to me before I did that. I also like to sometimes use my paper trimmer and just emboss a line or two all the way around the outside. I think that's another really great way to give a finished off look to a page. Okay, now I'm ready to add my tag, and I'm just adding some foam tape. You could certainly use dimensionals. I'm just trying to use up my stash of things right now. And so before I put that down, I'm going to bring in some of that linen thread again. I cannot get enough of this. We haven't had too much in the close to my heart world for a while of threads like this, or embellishing type things, ribbons and things like that we could use. And so I'm really loving the selection that we have from Stampin' Up, and I'm going crazy with it. So here I'm just taking some glue, and I put it in a real fine tip applicator just to make it a little bit easier to do on this skinny tiny font. And I'm putting down Christmas first so I can figure out where I want the Mary to go on there. So I'll glue those up. While I'm gluing that, I did want to remind you that for the month of July, we are having bonus days. And when you place an order in the United States for $50, then you will get a $5 coupon code emailed for you to use in the month of August. So you can get like an extra bonus by placing an order, and every $50 increment of product that you order will get you another coupon code for $5. So my last one I sent in was like $150, so it counted as a show. I got 3 of those coupon codes with that particular order. And today I decided it is time to order myself the yearly subscription of the Paper Pumpkin Kit. And again, I'll get a bunch of coupon codes. So here's a final look. I added some of those pine boughs around the outside, and you can see how shiny that Merry Christmas is with that packaging tape on there. And I hope you'll check out all the other designers from the Inspiration Collaboration Design Team. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for more crafty inspiration.